on the competitive stage with killing all day at the World Championship.
That's exactly right. It really came out of no
control and just the matchup in general. He was up against a mid-range Hunter deck, didn't get there, but SilverName's deck performed through and through. But Feno, you know, he talked a little bit yesterday about how the comfort position for him was that pan out.
That's
true. BGH on 5 for the lone giant that Feno played. You know, Feno had to coin an arcane intellect to try to dig for the right cards to get out of a situation. I mean, he ran into pretty much one of the best draws that Bunny Hopper could have had early on and ended up getting out of it. So I'm not going to count him out of it. And honestly, I think that when you're just talking about purely the caliber of player, it's difficult for Feno to really be an underdog to anybody.
And already we have some very interesting talking points in this matchup, because while we have been harping on again and again about the power of Bomb Warrior to just curve out, it's not necessarily what you're looking to do in this matchup. A lot of the time, the responsive capabilities of the Warrior is really what makes it shine in this matchup. So here, we could see in the mulligan, SilverName kept the Eternium Rover and the Clockwork Goblin. Do you like that mulligan, or do you think he should be going a little bit more aggressively for the removal?
I think an Eternium Rover can be very important in the matchup, but we have seen it a lot of times. You know, a turn 2 Sorcerer's Apprentice really contest an Eternium Rover straight up. And that is really my one concern for SilverName. On the Eternium Rover there is if he runs into Sorcerer's Apprentice, not only is his Eternium Rover going to get checked, but the Clockwork Goblin's checked right after that as well. So in my opinion, I think that while it's an important card, I don't think it's critical, and I think I'd be mulliganing for more like the meat and potatoes of the deck rather than the appetizer.
I fully agree. I think if he already had a Shield Slam in hand, you could see the kind of synergy there where the Eternium Rover might buff up the amount of armor you have in order to kill that all-important first Mountain Giant. But on the other side of the board, Feno's hand is looking pretty much about as good as you can get.
He's up against a start that's about as good as you get, though, too. I mean, this is the benefit of Eternium Rovers. If they don't get checked, you get a payoff.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of early minions.
I never got that before.
Wait a minute, early minions mean that you can get ahead? Huh. Crazy how that works.
For the moment here, Feno really just trying to stall out the game, keep his hand size nice and big until he can get out that classic, I would already call it, combo of Mountain Giant Thunderous Claw.
So I really want to focus in on that turn right there, where it seems like it's so easy to play Banana Buffoon. You Frostbolt that Clockwork Goblin, you think about how much life you buy by doing that. It's probably 6+ points of damage. And so being able to play Banana Buffoon next turn, you can't play Mountain Giant Conjurer's Calling on 5 mana anyway.
Yeah. I fully agree. I think that was a really great call as well. And with the... if you look at the discrete breakpoints as well, there was 5 attack on board in the 3 mechs. If Ziliax was to come down, the extra 3 attack would get it up to exactly 8 to be able to take out a Mountain Giant as well. So it's not only trying to defend his health total. I think this further ensures that he will be able to get something to stick on the board, which is really important against Warrior. If you're forcing them to use Shield Slams to kill your minions, that's fine because they'll run out eventually. If they're killing your stuff with their minions, that's when things start to get dicey.
Thinking back to yesterday where we saw Kalento always be 1 point of health above the breakpoints.
That's true.
For consecutive bomb draws for lethal. Had Boston in a bad spot yesterday in these kinds of situations. And Feno looking like he's going to get to a similar point. I am curious about this next turn, though, because he has a real call coming up with Banana Buffoon or with Ziliax and what he's going to choose and why. And now that he's drawn a second Conjurer's Calling, I feel like you have to have your eye on the Giant at this point. It's just too powerful of a chain that you can get going.
You mean he should be looking to play it on this turn or to save it
for the follow-up turn?
Yes.
Set up with the Giant with the Banana Buffoon and go from there.
I fully agree. I think with all this stuff that you can, all the Conjurer's Calls, you just need stuff you can point it at. And that is what the Giant absolutely is. I fully agree.
Just 2 Conjure. I mean, that's such a big threat to snowball the game. SilverName's going to have to check 2 big threats.
And at the moment, how does he do that?
Well, he's got a pair of Brawls.
So the plan is fall behind, let your opponent sink in those Conjurer's Calls, and then clear up afterwards.
I guess so. I mean,
it doesn't feel great.
Yeah, we did see SilverName yesterday, though, go for one of those power moves. Sometimes you got to make power moves. And he brawled in a 50-50 situation when he could have made it an 80-20 favorable to succeed on a brawl. But he needed the size of the minion in play for the brawl. He recognized that. So I'll be curious to see how SilverName goes through this. You know, yesterday in his media piece, in his interview, he talked about how he feels like control is the strongest part of his game. And I think yesterday that 50-50 call he made was a great one.
And I think what you say there about being very willing to take bold and big risks is a real facet of SilverName's play. Even just in this game, when we saw equipping the Wrench Caliber on turn 4 and didn't swing, going exactly into your opponent's Harrison turn. You know what? If they have it, they have it. I just want to get the absolute best value out of this card possible. I don't want to be wasting charges on face.
Take risks.
Yep. At this level of Hearthstone, you have to. Like you said, when your opponents are as strong as they are, you need something to go your way to be able to outclass them.
SilverName going to try to cash in on these Eternium Rovers in this spot, and very nicely does. 2 copies of two swings of the Warpath is going to grant him 8 points of armor. 2 more attacks from the Eternium Rover, 4 more armor. And then the last Warpath kills off one of the Grave Harbors.
Works out pretty nicely.
This is just a beautiful turn.
Yeah. However, this is the situation where I think if SilverName was playing on ladder against an average opponent, he'd be feeling pretty comfortable because he's thinking, okay, they've got a minion on board, they're going to spend a bunch of Conjurer's Callings, and then I'll brawl and just be in a perfectly good position. This is where Feno will thrive. He will know exactly the amount of pressure to put forward, what to hold back, so to play around Brawl and Super Collider at the same time.
I am curious about this. I personally would be ripping a second Conjurer's Calling.
I agree. I think 2 is not quite enough, especially when he is running that Super Collider in his primary deck.
So the thought here from Feno, it feels to me like he's going, okay, 1 copy of Brawl, I have a backup plan to that. 2 copies of Brawl?
Things are getting a bit sketchy.
Now that being said, I mean, there's only big minions on board right now, so even in the face of a second copy of Brawl, doesn't necessarily work. And talking about bold calls, SilverName is going to attempt to actually win the Brawl 25% of the time. This is disaster for Feno.
I thought that was going to happen there for a second.
I bet you he was sweating that one. As those minions fly out of the Brawl in that situation, when you're the player with all the giants in play, it feels like it's lasting forever.
Yeah.
As those minions fly out.
Well, I remember that the animation used to be that the last minion to go into the Brawl in the animation always survived.
We're going way back.
But they changed that, and I remember when they changed that, that was my comfort blanket. I knew what was going to survive beforehand, but now it's a scary time with Brawls indeed.
The future is ours.
Loads up a Stargazer Luna. I think a wise choice. In the face of a Brawl, if Luna lives, you have a potential to have a pop-off turn.
Oh yeah, Luna is fantastic against Warrior, which is why this turn is actually so interesting, because you have the time to make Luna as effective as possible in this matchup. But if it survives, like you said, that's fine for a Brawl, and if he doesn't use removal here, your turn is looking amazing.
Well, SilverName goes up to 18 this turn, so Feno is 2 damage off of lethal, 14, 15, 16, 17. 1 damage off lethal, excuse me. So a single point of damage for Feno ends the game.
So he could go for that off of the Mana Cyclone, obviously. We could just see double Banana, Elemental Evocation.
Bananas first.
Yeah, and obviously you got the Frost Nova as well. This is just looking pretty good overall. Unless he can't get the damage through and the Brawl comes down successfully for SilverName. Such a tense situation.
If Feno actually does not deliver lethal this turn, I know it's a super long shot, but SilverName could technically kill Feno on the following turn. The Boombot activations could provide that much damage via the Brawl activating.
Yeah, I still think for Feno, this is absolutely the way you go for it. You've got Fireball, you've got Frostbolt, Arcane Missiles, if you're feeling lucky, could get there as well. Oh!
Well, get ready.
I've cursed it.
Damage first.
1 missile is what he needs.
He's going to draw instead.
Okay. I mean,
if he simply would have drawn first, that would have been enough. However, I think that the chances from the Mana Cyclone are technically larger.
Yes, I think that was probably right.
But second Brawl for SilverName now.
And I think, even though I was joking, I like saving this from Feno, just because if the Brawl comes down, he has a higher chance to hit face with the missiles, and if the Brawl doesn't come down, he just wins.
Oh my. Wow. Oh my. Oh
What?
my.
What? Oh my god!
Feeno took 19 damage!
That was 1 damage off of the maximum amount that those bombs could have dealt.
And if that bomb could, if the other bomb connected phase, Feeno beat it 1!
I mean,
and no minion for SilverName means that Ziliax can't restore health.
he has lethal though with the arcane missiles because that
Oh, right.
down. Yeah.
0 minions in play.
Yeah. Well, that was scary though. That was scary. A bomb off the top would have just ended it right there.
Oh, you're right. There's 3 bombs in the deck.
3 bombs in the deck. He switched over to his secondary deck, which has taken out Super Collider, one of the best cards that Warrior has in his arsenal against Mage.
Now, that being said, he does remove 4 cards that are not so good versus Mage. It takes out an Archivist Luciana, takes out a Militia Commander, a Baleful Banker, and an Eternium Rover. He gets to add in 2 copies of Augmented Elic, a Weapons Project, a Shield Block, and a Darius Crowley. So I see his reasoning, but I feel like maybe this was just thought out poorly ahead of time, which is Darius Crowley's going to serve us well against Banana Buffoons, Mirror Image, Sorcerer's Apprentice, etc. The Augmented Elics serve good against Mage because you get to add some pressure.
Yep.
However, you're removing Super Collider, which is a major tool in the matchup.
I agree. And I think especially when your opponent is... Well, actually, okay, this is where it gets a bit more interesting, is if it was against... If he knew that Feeno was going to stick to his primary deck, for whatever reason, which he never would, he'd probably stick to his primary deck as well. Maybe because Feeno is switching over to his tertiary deck, which is fairly slow, fairly greedy, with the Hexlord Malakras thrown in there and the Archmage Antonidas. Because he's taken out some of the tempo cards in his deck, like Frost Nova and Banana Buffoon, SilverName is trying to capitalize on that by just killing him, by saying, you're the control deck now, I'm just going to get you with LX and curving out with bombs every turn.
It's a true story. I mean, for Feeno's tertiary deck, he also removes Ziliax and 2 copies of Rabble Bouncer.
That's a lot of anti-aggro.
And he adds in a Hexlord Malakras, 2 Astromancers, a Power Creation, and an Archmage Antonidas. I would almost argue, though, that makes you more vulnerable to Super Collider in that regard.
It does.
Although stronger against it in the long term. So why go to the long term if you're SilverName?
It's a bold strategy, Admirable. Let's see
if it
if
pays
it
off.
pans out.
Other thing to mention, too, is that I think SilverName is quite confident that Feeno will be keeping Harrison Jones.
Yes.
In the opening hand. We also saw Feeno do that yesterday.
We did, I remember it.
And if that's going to be the case, Super Collider, I think, is a bit vulnerable to Harrison Jones. However, you've added in a Weapons Project, and you still have 2 Wrench Calibers in the deck.
Yeah. Like, you know as well, though, that he's not adding in Ooze, because while Feeno has Ooze in his secondary deck, secondary is purely for Rogue. He would never switch to his secondary deck against Warrior.
SilverName contemplating Omega Assembly, perhaps? It could be trying to just send Feeno a message that that's a card other than Omega Assembly.
Well, I mean, it's in keeping with his game plan of switching to his secondary deck, right? Where it's just playing out his cards quickly and not trying to take things through to the late game.
So then the plan would be Omega Assembly, find a mech to secure on board, and then go into Ziliax.
Which he's got.
I mean, that would be the consideration for Omega Assembly.
Yeah.
It's interesting. SilverName certainly has a unique playstyle that it contrasts a lot with what I'm used to seeing. That doesn't mean it's better or worse. I don't think Hearthstone is a right or wrong game. I think Hearthstone's more of a grading scale. And when I look at the way that SilverName plays, it is very much a risk versus reward style of play, which I am almost always an advocate for.
Right, and I think one other thing I want to add in his favor is it's a weird style of play. I agree, it's not something I'm used to, but he plays with conviction. He's sticking to his game plan here. You know, if he was to go for a more tempo route and then suddenly switch over to playing value, playing control, going for the late game, that I would not like. But this style, he's saying, I'm curving out, this is a tempo deck, we're playing for it.
This is a really big talking point, too, because when you look at game plans overall, I think one of the biggest mistakes players can make is deviating from a game plan before they have a very real, concrete reason to do so. There's a certain point where you got to change gears. Everybody knows that's going to crop up in a game of Hearthstone. However, when you think about it in totality, you have to have good evidence to do that. So when you start to go down a road, you have to follow through.
Yes. And so far, that is definitely what we're seeing from SilverName. Feeno here going with the Harrison Jones to remove the Weapons Project, which makes sense. He needed to cycle through his deck. At the time, his hand really wasn't doing much of anything.
It was a stinger.
It really was. But now, with that one Harrison Jones, it has absolutely flipped on its head. Next turn, we could see Mountain Giant Conjurers calling, even if he wanted to, with an Elemental Evocation and a Mana Cyclone thrown in there as well.
I do think this works out in SilverName's favor, though. He gets to answer back with Harrison Jones and then Shield Slam the opposing one. This was a really well planned out turn.
Yep.
And I think this setup started with the turn 4 Omega Assembly, where SilverName knew if he found something like Omega Devastator, he was going to be off the Ziliax plan. But he gave himself an open option. Go into the Weapons Project, and then, you know, after the dueling Harrison Jones, you snag tempo by using a Shield Slam.
And again, it's in keeping, right? It's just keeping the board, getting in that chip damage, and trying to close it out with bombs later on.
Now, that being said, I'm curious how much the Augmented Elec could possibly change that plan. Perhaps now you're on more of a conservative traded up plan. The problem I see with that is if SilverName lets his Harrison lives, the Shield Slam becomes almost a moot point anyway without the second Weapons Project being invested.
He could quite happily invest the second Weapons Project, though, just to power up the Shield Slam.
It delays the Wrench Caliber then, though.
Oh, okay.
So that's playing against the idea there. I think SilverName is in a really tough spot here. And I think a lot of it boils down to, does he think that Fino's going to trade, or does he think that Fino's going to go face?
The problem is that contrary to his previous game, he doesn't have brawls to catch up if his opponent does go wide on board.
I think that means Shield Slam. I also think that Fino is a player who tends to capitalize on damage when it's available. And SilverName has to know that.
What do you mean like that? He likes to go face?
When you can secure damage, you secure damage.
Oh, he does.
When your biggest minion on board did not get checked, that's typically a sign that you can get aggressive.
That's a big draw, though, now from SilverName.
Yeah, it's really scary, though. He has nothing to back this up with. He has nothing to add. At what point does that need to get out there and rolling?
Right.
He has to bridge over to this Omega Devastator and find a way to take advantage of the tempo there.
Okay, so let's look at how he does that then. On this turn, Brawl is far from necessary. We could just see Ziliax on this turn in order to take out one of the 7/8 Grave Horrors.
This is interesting because the Augmented Elec is demanding some attention, lest SilverName get 2 more bombs shuffled into Fino's deck. He's getting to check one of these right away.
Ziliax can be saved for when he's actually damaged as well, to get a little bit of lifesteal as well, which is a big
on
deal.
10, the Omega Devastator Ziliax.
Good point, very good point.
So I think SilverName
like
has a solid game plan here, and the Augmented Elec, I think, is providing a lot of disruption to Fino's game plan right now.
And also, I guarantee you that SilverName considered this exact turn as a possibility when he Shield Slammed the Harrison last turn.
Yes.
Because he's thinking, okay, 6 mana, my opponent goes Mountain Giant, Conjurer's Calling, a vast majority of the time. If they can do that, they will. And so then I have 5 attack on board, 3 from the Wrench Caliber as well, perfectly sets out this turn.
And I don't think Fino had a different way to set up that turn. Like, you know, SilverName's trying to take advantage of something like that, or at least, you know, try to bring it to parity anyway. And oftentimes when your opponent has clearly set up for your best turn, talking about those deviation points, that's a time where you can consider deviating. Fino just didn't have a way to do that, so he had to follow through.
And here we're seeing Fino go for a big old reload on his hand. His hand is still just looking pretty juicy, to be honest. It's all big threats, card generation, card draw.
And the big one for me is these Mana Cyclones, what they're doing is they're just juicing up cards in hand for the Astromancer. Oh, yes.
Drawing bombs early when you're at a healthy life total.
All right.
Exactly what you want as well.
SilverName, I think, is now officially in trouble.
Yeah.
He has 1 Brawl. He has a Warpath, which does not service this turn. And Fino's about to roll into 2 Astromancers. So how do you bridge the gap to turn 10? And then also take advantage of your turn 10. Like, this is a colossal task.
Okay, I mean, there are ways that he can get there, right? So if we were to see Brawl on this turn, because this is a pretty scary board, you're going to be taking a lot of damage if you don't. And then assuming he wins by getting one of the 3 good options of the Brawl, next turn he could just go Omega Devastator Ziliax. He doesn't have to save that for turn 10.
It's true.
If things are looking really scary.
So my question is, does he need to brawl right now? Because if he brawls right now, Fino develops on turn 8, and then on turn 9, what do you do then? So I'm curious, because he's got Omega Devastator and Ziliax, can he wait a turn, tank the damage, and then Brawl to bridge the gap to 10. Because then on 10, he takes this damage, he Brawls on turn 9, he goes into turn 10, and he has Omega Devastator Ziliax, clears out the major threat, and then restores health.
I think he had to just pray that he wins this Brawl, because if you leave Fino with 16 damage on board, he is just going to be chipping away every single turn. He's not going to overcommit, and as you can see,
Bad
SilverName
news
there.
for SilverName.
He is not happy to see those bombs. He wanted to wait for Blast Master Boom to come out of the deck, get all those boom bots, and then have his opponent.
That damage is just not relevant right now.
Yep, doesn't make a difference quite yet. Wow.
Yep, it's that one. He's been cropping up a lot lately.
We're seeing a lot of Stegatron this weekend, the unofficial mascot of the Grandmasters League.
You see where I was alluding to, though. SilverName was slated to take 18 damage there from 33. So you would add 1 to that for the hero power. So he's taking 19 damage from 33. He'd have 14 life left. He'd Brawl this turn. He's safe from the single minion attack, and then he goes into Omega Devastator Ziliax. Is that ever enough to recover, is the real question.
But the difference is negligible in either way you do it, because, so say he hadn't Brawled on turn 8, if you assume that Fino is clever enough to not overdevelop on the following turn, you're Brawling the same amount of stuff next turn anyway, so you've taken the same amount of damage.
It's the timing, though. Like, now what does he do this turn? That was my concern.
Well, he chunks damage. He chunks the damage now that he would have done last turn anyway.
But this turn, so Fino gets another message that you don't have a Brawl, and now gets to overdevelop.
Yeah.
It's a really weird setup.
Really weird. It's really weird.
I don't think SilverName's in good shape either way. And I think that drawing second Brawl is probably a necessity anyway.
Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to see if there a way he could have squeezed out that 1 extra turn. And we talked about this yesterday too, being, pretty overly critical and nitpicky. But I think when you're talking about the best players in the world, that's what you have to do.
Yeah. I think what he did. I don't know.
I have no problem with it.
I think taking the 18 damage that it would have been, it's just too much. He had to hope he got lucky there off the Brawl, and he just didn't. And so now, what is this? Still 18 damage yet again on this turn for Fino. And a whole bunch of survivability with this board as well. With the damage Stegatrons not even dying to an Omega Devastator. That's when you know you're in trouble. And it does look like Fino might be smelling blood here, because he is very happy to play out these little minions that are very bad against Brawl. And he's throwing in the Sea Giants. Yep, he knows what's up now. Like you said, this was all the information he needed.
And for SilverName, the Explodinator is to set up for a Brawl draw. I mean, his intention here is to draw Brawl.
And then win it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fine out. It's very unlikely to happen, but he's very unlikely to win this game.
When luck shuts the door, you got to open up the window. We got one more door to check.
So there's still a secret in play, which could be counterspelled from where SilverName is sitting. So if he goes Omega Devastator to kill off one of the Giants, and then Ziliax on top of it.
It's just not enough.
Yeah.
What now?
So he's going to check here for counterspell.
Yeah, and then he's going to try and draw to Brawl.
Sees like not, try to draw to Brawl.
Yeah.
Wise.
I think this is a good idea.
Nope. A valiant effort, but Fino is going to secure this in a very decisive fashion.
I think there's only 2 bombs in his deck now at all, because I think he drew all the bombs in his deck previously. So even in the absolute perfect scenario here, I don't think SilverName has a chance.
That's right. Fino, quick 2-0 to open up the day, and is doing work.